I'm Aaron Morin, and this is Nanaimo, British Columbia, Canada. Last year here, the RCMP raided 3 dispensaries and arrested several people, including customers who are using cannabis to treat their illnesses. The RCMP claimed that the dispensaries were overtly marketing and selling to minors. Some municipalities, like Vancouver and Port Alberni, have already begun regulating how dispensaries can operate in their jurisdictions. While everyone is preparing for medicinal cannabis to be legalized, it seems like the police are still targeting those who supply it. I wanted to figure out what's going on and what Nanaimo is doing about their dispensaries.
So in November, we, along with, I believe, 8 other dispensaries in town, it might have been more, received a cease and desist letter from the RCMP. And it was just a single sheet of paper. It wasn't on letterhead. It was issued by an RCMP officer who went around to every dispensary that day.
A officer from the Nanaimo RCMP visited the majority of the dispensaries here in Nanaimo, and basically stating that what we were doing was illegal and that we had a certain amount of time to cease operations or we risked arrest. They came in and they treated it like a raid. Like basically the cop car came, just bam, right on the sidewalk. The officers came in, screaming, "This is a raid, get on the floor, blah, 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 blah." It scared a lot of people because at our particular dispensary, like I said, we had 3 senior citizens, we had some employees, a couple of customers. It was ridiculous, and they were all treated like criminals when in reality they were in a medicinal cannabis dispensary for medicine. And I'm not faulting the police either because the police are just doing their job. Mm-hmm. But what I am faulting is just the hypocrisy in it and the fact that you're treating medical patients as criminals. That's not fair. And I put that on the government. I put that on the government because they need to make these changes.
We immediately responded saying that we would not cease, and that our actions were protected by our members' rights according to Section 7 of the Charter's Rights and Freedoms, their right to security of the person.
Well, it's a tough situation. As you mentioned, these folks were arrested in December. Their first court appearances aren't until mid to late March at the earliest. And so that's just to get to the first appearance in court. If we have to defend these matters to their conclusion, the Smith case, for example, went to the Supreme Court of Canada, it took the better part of 5 years. But it comes at a personal cost. It comes at a legal cost. It comes at a stress level cost. And it comes with having to deal with things like the media, public interest, repeated court appearances. None of that's easy. And hopefully we're past the point in time in the evolution of this issue where that's going to continue to happen. But as we saw as recently as last December, police in Nanaimo decided to raid some of the dispensaries in Nanaimo, but not all. And then the dispensaries open back up and they haven't been raided again. So it really makes you scratch your head and say, well, what was the point in the first place of going in there and sort of flexing your muscles in this way? The people don't want it. The public doesn't want it. Patients don't want it. Why are we doing it?
The Trudeau government ran on a legalization platform last year and won the election. However, it's still illegal to grow and sell medicinal cannabis unless you are a Health Canada approved licensed producer, or LP for short. The alternative is to go to a dispensary. And because they're not regulated by the federal government or Health Canada, they don't have these limitations on the sale of derivatives like edibles. If a municipality decides to regulate dispensaries, they become licensed businesses, but they remain illegal in the eyes of the federal government and of the RCMP.
So what is a dispensary?
A dispensary is a place where the community can come and purchase cannabis products and derivative products at a storefront and with customer service, with knowledgeable people behind the counter that can advise them on what they understand the effects of something to be.
So you get professionalism, you get face-to-face knowledge. It's also kind of helps build a community. I mean, when people have these illnesses, it's nice to meet other people who have been through that or are going through that at this time. So it kind of allows people to network and help each other as well.
Now, our customer service representatives are not doctors and they're not health professionals, but they are experienced and knowledgeable about the product. As I said, it's a hub of information, and so they're all sharing knowledge with one another, and we encourage them to do their own research as well as we share educational forums with them. There's the face-to-face aspect. Now, that's not just that it's like customer service in the sense of you're dealing with another human, but it's somebody from your community that you know. In that sense, one of the reasons why you might go to a dispensary rather than an LP is because it's more familiar. It's less of a faceless group that you sort of call on the phone or work through mail order. Dispensaries, in their as yet unregulated form, where they're trying to create the rules in a self-regulating industry, offer a wider variety of not just flower products, and so there's a wide range of strains, there's a wide range of price points, but they also have edible products, oils, extracts, essential oils, topicals, many things that LPs have had their hands tied by Health Canada and not been able to provide.
On the flip side, you also have the black market. There's a lot of people who would prefer not to, make a phone call to their guy at 11 o'clock at night and go meet at the 7-Eleven parking lot and get their bag of weed that way either. That way you don't know what you're getting. You don't know if it's an indica or a sativa. If you're taking it for medicine, or even if you're taking it recreationally and just want to know what you're buying, the black market isn't ideal either. That's why they go to the dispensaries. So I think that there's just the market is dictating that there's a need for dispensaries or a dispensary model, and that's why they're popping up everywhere.
Like before those clubs got raided in Nanaimo, it seemed like a free-for-all, really. But even despite those occasional police incursions, there's a momentum happening in our industry that's undeniable right now.
There are no gray areas in law. Things are either legal or illegal. And operating a medical cannabis dispensary is completely illegal. You're trafficking, you're possessing for the purpose of trafficking, you're laundering the proceeds of crime. You might even be engaged in a criminal organization offense, as that term's defined in the Criminal Code of Canada. But I think what has happened is, over the years, two sort of strands in law have developed. One's a practical strand, and that is law enforcement has decided not to aggressively investigate and arrest those operating medical cannabis dispensaries that are helping people live a better quality of life in local communities. And that's been very individualized. It really depends where you are and what the local tolerance for that activity is. The second is a line of cases that have developed in the courts around medical cannabis. And these cases have really been going on since 2001, maybe even a bit earlier. Throughout that span, there have been these medical cannabis dispensaries. And what they've been doing is really filling what the courts have sometimes called a void or a legislative lacuna, basically an emptiness in the way that people actually get medical cannabis in this country. The systems that the government have come up with have not worked sort of on the ground at a practical level, and so people have blazed a trail and opened these dispensaries.
I understand that pretty much everywhere in the island there's people that want to have these facilities. There's an obvious need, and it's just a matter of time before more storefronts open, as I think people become bolder with the growth in the industry, the federal government saying that they will legalize it. There's a growing sense of opportunity now that never existed before, and the fear of prosecution is diminishing every day.
If cities aren't proactively regulating in the way that cities regulate all businesses that use property in the cities, then I think they're missing the boat. This is coming. They're not going anywhere. Vancouver's done it. Port Alberni's done it. Kimberley, BC's done it. Victoria's on the way towards doing it. Hopefully that catches on and sort of sweeps across the country. Let's pass some sensible and reasonable regulations at the municipal level, governing land use, which is well within our jurisdiction as a municipality, and let's do this thing.
So how do municipalities begin regulating dispensaries? Victoria recently proposed a set of bylaws to the public that limits what a dispensary can do in the city. Their proposed bylaws include a ban on the sale of edibles and a minimum distance requirement between dispensaries and schools and dispensaries and other dispensaries. The City of Victoria recently held an open house to let the public voice their opinion about the proposed regulations. I went to Victoria to learn more about how a municipality begins the process of regulating dispensaries.
Our regulations are focusing on areas that are of local government authority, so we certainly anticipate that any change in the federal regime should mesh nicely with our regulations as well. I believe it was last year we started looking into the issue, and really what precipitated it was just the increase in numbers in dispensaries. We had some concerns expressed by the Victoria Police Department, and I think they were quite instrumental in bringing forward some of the concerns. So certainly last May we presented a report to council sort of asking them what did they want to do about the proliferation of dispensaries, and that was the time when we got direction to develop some regulations for them. We did a first phase of consultation last summer, and I sent out letters to all the dispensaries that we knew of, inviting them to participate. I probably visited about 10 different dispensaries and had site tours and learned about their operations. Others sent in written submissions. We also had a survey going last summer that people could respond to. So yes, we've been very open to involvement from dispensaries, listening to their suggestions and sort of reviewing what their current business practices are.
It is a great honor to be before you tonight. As you know, I've been coming before this council for 2 decades to see these changes happen, and to see this, it's just very humbling. That being said, while we're very grateful that the police might not be busting at our door as quickly after this, we still have some concerns with the regulations.
What do you think of the proposed regulations in Victoria so far?
Well, I think that there are a number of rules that need to be discussed. It's wonderful to be getting licensed, that's for sure. But the rules around no consumption, no edibles, no deliveries, and no children at all are certainly rules that need to be contested. The 200-meter rule, to me, is probably a questionable one as well. But the other rules for sure seem to limit, what patients should have access to without any good reason. So.
Yes, the proposed distance requirements are a subject of concern for some of the retailers. We're proposing 200 meters from schools and 200 meters from other retailers. There's not a huge issue with the distance from schools. I believe we maybe have 1 or 2 that's an issue, but certainly we have a number of retailers that are closer than 200 meters to other retailers. In Vancouver, they've gone with, I believe, a 300-meter distance between retailers and schools. Where we derived the 200-meter distance was from looking at our current policy for liquor retail stores. We felt 200 meters is already embedded in that policy and is probably a better measure of community standards here in Victoria rather than using Vancouver's model.
For example, in Vancouver, the ban of edibles, it kind of made me scratch my head a little bit. In Port Alberni, for example, open windows for the storefront. That also made me scratch my head. I think it's important too with the ban of edibles, just about the fact that a lot of people, who use edibles for pain management, they do it because they don't like to smoke. So their next best or most preferred option usually is edibles. So by banning edibles and telling people that you can only use cannabis by smoking it, or it doesn't really make sense to me.
Essentially, from a staff perspective, we've just felt that we don't have the tools to make sure that edible products are safe and meet a certain quality control standard. And so absent that authority to make sure they're safe, we feel like they shouldn't be allowed. There are some producers that absolutely are packaging and labeling these products very well, but certainly there's quality control issues. There's concerns about accidental ingestion if these aren't labeled properly, overconsumption if you don't know how much dosage you're getting, and food safety concerns, not so much at the retailers themselves, but some of these are coming from unregulated production facilities. From a staff perspective, we're certainly concerned with impacts on neighborhoods, impacts on community, and not so much sort of the image we're portraying to the world. But certainly in reviewing feedback that we've had from members of the public, there is a concern that we look like the pot capital. We have more marijuana retailers than we have Starbucks. Conversely, some people say maybe that's a good thing and we'll get marijuana tourists coming to Victoria. So I guess it depends what kind of image you want to portray. But that's not really a primary consideration as staff. We're more concerned with impacts on our community and impacts on our neighborhood.
Other municipalities in Canada have already started regulating dispensaries. Victoria is on its way to regulating dispensaries. After the notice was delivered to dispensaries in Nanaimo by the RCMP, Matt O'Donnell and others in the medical cannabis community here organized and met with Nanaimo City Hall to ask for help.
So I think at first they were sluggish, but at the same time, in the end, they did the right thing and they chose that, let's look into this and let's see what the business benefits are. Let's see what the benefits are to the community, and let's be proactive on it. So I think now they're doing great. I mean, I think they're making great progress, and I'm excited to see what they come up with.
After the raids, and on December 15th, I was up at a city council meeting in Nanaimo where I presented to the city council about how regulating dispensaries is going to be the less costly, more effective, and better, and it's going to serve the health of the community better than allowing the RCMP to continue to raid. And in response to that delegation, the city directed staff to research and make recommendations for possible licensing of cannabis dispensaries in Nanaimo. So that process is now underway, and I fully expect that they'll come up with a model that is similar to Victoria's, and I hope that the City Council passes it. One thing that I'd say that Nanaimo City Council, and to any city council in British Columbia, is that working through regulations is going to be the more cost-effective way for the city to handle dispensaries and the cannabis trade in this region than waiting and postponing and waiting for the federal government. At the end of the day, it will be the municipalities that have to decide where these businesses are zoned and what is going to be the municipal and bylaw enforcement inspection regime for these businesses.
I mean, I think consumers, patients have spoken with their feet. Why do you choose where you go to? Well, you develop relationships with the people there. You enjoy their quality of service. You feel appreciated and known when you walk into your local pharmacy. That's the same thing that dispensaries provide to people, that same sort of environment. And I think it's a critical piece of the puzzle. Look, I think the next obvious battle is for dispensaries. They're here, they're not going anywhere. We need to establish that they're entitled to operate, and in fact that they are at the heart of access to medical cannabis, that they're important for patients to be able to have reasonable choice and the ability to make decisions for their own personal use. In an ideal world, let's just let the consumer decide, and let's treat it like we treat all natural health products. Regulations on manufacture so that what you're getting is labeled appropriately and is a quality controlled product. Reasonable regulations, unlike the MMPR. And then consumers can decide for themselves if they want to ingest the product or not. That's really the direction we need to be headed in.
There are certainly some dispensaries that are going to be negatively affected by these regulations, but that's why there's regulations, so that they make sure that everybody is operating correctly and so that they toe the line, and so that it's not a establishment that is doing business in a bad way.
Mm-hmm. They have two options, basically. They know what the federal government's going to do. It's not really up for debate. Mm-hmm. In one way or another, legalization's happening.
So it remains to be seen if Nanaimo is headed in that direction. But on February 25th, 2016, the Supreme Court of Canada handed down a ruling calling the Conservative government's distribution model for medical cannabis as unconstitutional for how it restricted access to medical cannabis patients. It also gave the Trudeau government 6 months to develop a new model. They have the opportunity to legitimize medical cannabis dispensaries or keep them in the state of legal limbo that they are in right now. In the meantime, Nanaimo can prepare for either reality.